Apando saber.
I love it.
Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. In today's episode, we are doing a 6-year review of owning my Tesla Model 3 all-wheel drive. Bought it in January of the year 2020, and you can see some of the pictures here. Flew to Vancouver, and that's where I picked it up on the way home. First supercharge was in Hope, BC. There's my home charger in the garage, and yes, I live in northern BC where lots of people do not like EVs.
All right, Tesla Prince, let's see what this thing's got. Hit it. Burnout time. Whoa, look at that smoke. Ha! Diesel fumes, baby.
And so my experience is in very cold climate, northern British Columbia, Canada, and with lots of people who work in mines and logging in the oil fields and whatnot, and that's sort of the mentality. And we're going to be discussing things like battery range and capacity, what has happened with the vehicle over the years. We are going to talk about, extreme temperature and what happens there. How is the charging equipment holding out over the years? How is that whole experience of fueling up? Where am I able to drive? What are the conditions I can drive in, right? When you talk about range, people are wondering how practical is it to own an electric vehicle in a place like northern BC, Canada. And you'll see here, the channel obviously is devoted to information about Tesla, but even more so in the backcountry. So you can see here some of the clips taking the Tesla to a lot of trailheads, a lot of unconventional places where proving that, electric car can go there. And it's going to be a pretty interesting discussion after these 6 years. A lot has been learned. We are going to be talking about maintenance. What kind of maintenance have I done over the years? What kind of repairs have I had to do? What are those related to the electric vehicle itself, and as opposed to just maintenance that you'd have to do with any vehicle? Because there are a lot of things that are just a car is a car is a car. It doesn't matter if it's electric or gasoline or whatever. We're going to talk about the charging experience, whether it's on the road or charging at home, how that's been, what the cost savings have been. Have there been any cost savings? And we're going to talk about range anxiety, which is probably a big issue that people ask the question, where can you drive if I spend all this money on an electric vehicle, can I even use it where I want to go? Well, Tesla Backcountry Prince is going to show you my experience over those 6 years. We're also going to talk about sort of the final frontier, I believe, of electric vehicle adoption. That's trucks. There's a state of electric trucks, and where are they at? Because that's an important one, because there's some places you just can't bring a Tesla Model 3 or any passenger EV. You need high clearance, and maybe you need a lot more range to get down logging roads to where you want to go, like a place like Kako Provincial Park. Is it practical in 2026? So we're going to cover a whole lot of topics. Hopefully you guys stay for the ride. And if you have any additional things that you would like information about, feel free to pop a comment down there in this video, and I'll see if I can answer that. That's not going to work. If you like the video, any part of it, please do click that like button. It helps with what we do here on the channel. And consider subscribing to the channel if you like the content here. It helps us out. Anyways, we are going to get into the video here. You can see all kinds of things, accidents, and car crashes and all kinds of crazy things over those 6 years, things outside of your control. But that's life, right? What is life like when you live in northern BC where there's no service center close by? How do you get service, right? We've talked about some of that in the videos, but we'll kind of bring it all together in this 6-year video. Where is it at today? A lot has changed over the 6 years, especially regarding where you can charge and where you can even drive on the highways. How's the charging infrastructure? How fast does it charge your vehicle? How long do I have to wait? Where can I practically drive that vehicle? We'll get into all those details, and let's get into it. right, so it's been 6 years, and let's jump right into it. The first thing we're going to talk about are some statistics I gathered from our Facebook group, Northern BC Canada EV group. We have close to 700 members, and it's a pretty decent sampling of people from around the region. I asked them in the first question, what is the number one issue that you believe hinders people from buying an EV today in BC? Now, understand these are people who are engaged. They're in this Facebook group. They're interested in EVs in some way. Maybe they're anti-EV, but probably most of them are wanting to learn about EVs. Maybe they're owners, etc. And these are the answers. So you'll see there on the screen, the number one item, almost 50%, 43% was education. People believe in this region that people just don't understand enough about EVs. And it's, that's the largest reason people believe in Northern BC that there isn't more EV adoption. And then in second place, we have the price of EVs at 28%. Lots of people, I think across Canada, would definitely use price as one. They are more expensive, generally speaking, than gasoline and diesel vehicles, but not all of them, and prices are coming in pretty close here, especially with the new Chinese EVs that will be coming soon to Canada.
China EVs are bad, make ICE great again. It's not from China, Doge.
Anyways, the third item was range of EVs. And honestly, I thought range would have been higher up there, but in a way, I'm not surprised at all. Because I personally think infrastructure is actually very important. But people didn't really think infrastructure was really that important. But we'll come back to that later in the video as to why I think that's one of the most important items. And it'll dovetail into price and whatnot in a interesting few ways. Anyways, you can see all the stats there. The top three, I mentioned them, and kind of breaks down after that. Infrastructure lacking, etc. And you can see some of the comments there. There's somebody who works at the Ford dealership here in town. They also own a Ford Mach-E, and they talk to people about this stuff every single day pretty much. Most common thing he hears at the dealership is that it's more expensive up front. People don't understand charging systems, the fear of not enough infrastructure, and like he says, there needs to be some kind of education, a campaign or something, so that people understand how these EVs work and how they get around. And that makes sense to me. From conversations I've had over these 6 years, I'm hearing a lot of the same things in those two areas. At least that's people's perception. We're not saying these are necessarily the real problems, but these are what people are thinking. And that's important because that's driving purchases. So then the next poll that I'm going to throw up here on the screen was service, EV service in our region. So this is all in Northern BC. This is not down in the lower mainland. So EV service in our region is in what condition today, in your opinion? And I asked people after voting, feel free to add comments below. First mention the year, make, and model you have, etc. Pretty interesting answers here. I can't say I'm too surprised. The number one item voted in at 37% was service is poor in our region. We'll talk more about all these things. I just want to show the stats for now. And again, this is people's perception, and that's important. So people believe service is poor overall. The second item, people say didn't need to have service yet. So they couldn't really give an opinion there because they didn't need any service. But it could also be that they don't know where they would have to go if they had to get service. In that 24% of people, how many are Tesla owners? And there's no Tesla service center around here, for example. And then the third item there is my brand is great. They service at the local dealership. And, that could be stores in town, Ford, Chevy, Chrysler, all of those, Toyota, whatnot. Although there have been lots of discussion over the years that while the dealerships exist, many of the techs are not really trained or prepared to handle any major types of problems. I think that's changed a lot in recent years. But anyway, that's people's perception that their brand has great service. So for those that do have dealerships here in town, that's how they feel. And then the other ones are pretty small in terms of what was picked. And then getting into the comments, lots of comments on this service one, a very passionate subject. People talking about Tesla, saying non-existent service because we don't have any official Tesla service centers anywhere nearby. And I've talked about this over the years, several videos on this, both on the fact that they are not close by and the hassles that you would have to deal with. So there's someone talking about that. And then of course we have River's Edge Services. I've made videos about this company. They're not a dealership. They're not affiliated with any brand, but they do pretty much work on all EVs. And they've taken the training. They're one of the few shops in town that have actually spent many months, gone down to the Lower Mainland, got that specialized EV training. I've used them. I personally believe they're excellent in the service they provide. The one negative thing is that they are expensive. But at the same time, you kind of choose what you want. You either pay more and get local service, or you pay maybe even more than that to get your vehicle done at service centers that are far, far away, and all the hassle and hotels and flights and all that kind of thing. So there's all that to deal with them. And of course, the owner there, he's chimed in. He's not just the owner, he has several EVs. And he's talked about how they can do any diagnostics, work on any EV stuff, which they have for all kinds of brands. So there you go. Then we have people with Nissan Leafs. Didn't need much service. But the prices are ridiculously high. Another comment, Tesla, a 2017 Model S, a Model Y from 2026, Toyota BZ4X from 2023, and they use River's Edge in a pinch. But Kelowna Service Center, they say, is trying to come up here a few times a year, maybe 2 to 4 times a year. They're trying to work out something where they can get a whole bunch of Tesla owners and do work here. Now, that's going to work for small to mid-sized amounts of work, but major work that requires lifts and stuff like that, that may be a challenge depending on what kind of setup they get in Prince George. And other comment. Yeah, again, Ford Mach-E owner saying that the Ford dealership has been pretty good. Other people talking about Ford Focus, Kia Soul, EV Blazer, Sierra Denali, all at the dealership getting software updates. Nothing major so far. It's been flawless. Didn't need to see the dealership. So a lot of people saying that. At least they haven't had to deal with it yet. Anything major yet anyways. Somebody said they weren't happy with River's Edge. Hyundai Ioniq 5, they're happy with Northland Hyundai. And then down there at the end, there's somebody with the Jeep Wrangler EV, and they say they hate the annual battery recalls, lack of knowledge at the dealership there, stuck with limited edition. So there's all kinds of difference all over the map. Depending on the dealership and the type of vehicle you have, it seems like it's varied. All right, so next we are going to get into detailed statistics about my my own Model 3 for the last 6 years. And to do that, I use a tool called Teslafi. And it's just basically a website. It's something I've subscribed to from the beginning of ownership. And basically it's a third party, and you give them access to the details of your vehicle, and they just collect information and show a whole bunch of stats around your driving and what's going on with the car. And so I really like this app, and I know a lot of other YouTubers and data nerds use this website. There are other alternatives as well, but this is the one that was there at the time when I bought my car, and it's what I've stuck with over the years. So I do have some nice consistent data, and you can just see here the main page, teslafi.com. They have all the information about it. You can log information about your Tesla Model S, X, 3, or Y in any country in the world. It's cloud storage, so they store the information on their end. They do number crunching. They're always adding new features. They do have support, and they do charge tracking for each charge on your car, charging summaries, software tracking when there's updates, all kinds of stuff about your drives, temperature efficiency. Let's get into all of that. So here we are. We're just going to kind of go through different statistics for my car. 172,500 kilometers on the car at this point. And we've got the tire pressures and all this kind of thing. Here we start off with, under the drives menu, the drive summary. Here we have our top destinations. It's tracked that, how many times I've driven there, pages and pages of that by date. Where are the longest drives? Now this top drive is incorrect. There's some corrupt information there on the top one, but everything else is correct underneath it. So the longest drive I did still stems back to the year 2020, when I drove from Dawson Creek all the way home in a single charge. That was just over 400 kilometers one way. And that was in end of August. And then the second longest drive was the opposite, driving from home to Dawson Creek, 397 kilometers. So you can see there's slight variations depending on where I stopped and started from. Other long drives are driving from home in here in Prince George to Smithers in a single charge. Again, almost like driving to Dawson Creek, same distance in a single drive. Did that in 2022. As well in a single drive, driving from Prince George to Jasper in a single charge, almost the same. So these are three different directions, Dawson Creek being north, Smithers being west, Jasper being east, all of them within a few kilometers of each other, just showing, and they all have their different terrain types, elevations, all that kind of thing. And Jasper, this was done in mid-September roughly. The Smithers drive, interestingly, was done in February. So it was a cold, wintry day then, and honestly, not a whole lot of difference between those drives. So that's kind of, and we have other drives here. We're driving from northern Manitoba to Supercharger in Saskatchewan, not quite as far, but anyway. So those are sort of the longest drives I've done in a single charge. Drives that make most of the battery in a single drive. And let's see which one here. Yeah, it's saying most efficient drive basically was when I drove from home to Smithers. And that was, again, that February drive. Here's all the stats here. And basically 96% efficiency, which is pretty good. Longest drive, 4 hours, 18 minutes. And that was driving from Prince Albert, Saskatchewan to northern Manitoba. And I think that one was long because not necessarily the kilometers, but the terrain was pretty bad. I think I'm going to say an hour of that drive was on gravel back roads. Lowest recorded temperature, minus 37 degrees Celsius. Just driving around town here in Prince George, minus 37. And I know driving long distance to McBride we did a video on that, and that was about minus 30. So coldest we've had driving around town here, close to minus 40. Highest temperature, interestingly, plus 46 degrees Celsius. So gets pretty cold, gets pretty hot. That's a huge variation in temperatures here. So let's get into the temperature efficiency graph now. So what's interesting about the data that we're looking at here is this is a compilation of all the driving over 6 years, 172,000 kilometers, all around, let's say, northern Canada, southern Canada, in the western provinces. And you can see here, as it gets cold, minus 35 and colder, we're getting down to about 40% efficiency. So if you need to drive in minus 35 temperatures all the time, you're going to have some struggle. Now, I do not have a heat pump, and that definitely will improve your efficiency. But you can see there. And that interesting at the other end, at plus 40 degrees Celsius, at that point, you're getting down to 57% efficiency. When it's very hot out, that battery needs to be cooled. And when it's very cold out, that battery needs to be warmed up. And that just takes energy out of the battery, which makes it less efficient. And you can see the graphs here. So kind of the sweet spot, of course, is plus 5 degrees Celsius, all the way up to getting close to 40 degrees Celsius, right? You're in the 80s in terms of your efficiency. One thing I should point out is, which is important to note, so when we get that news information telling us cars can't drive in the cold and all that, that's just not true. Look at the number of kilometers that I've driven in these temperatures. Now, I just go out and drive. It doesn't matter what the temperature is, I just drive. But generally speaking, people are not taking long road trips when it's minus 20 out. Generally speaking, unless you're a salesperson or you have no choice. Maybe that's like once every few years when you have to, but it's just not really happening. Most of the driving here in northern Canada, where I live in Prince George, the bulk of the kilometers are kind of in the sweet spot anyway. That's what the data is telling me here. And again, this car is used by the family all the time, road trips and everything. So, you know, the bars, these bar graph below the line here, this is number of kilometers driven at that temperature. So again, most of the kilometers are driven where it doesn't really matter when it's really cold. So just pointing that out. Let's get into speed efficiency. This should be interesting. So over all those kilometers, it's not a straight line. Look at this, guys. When you're driving 5 to 10 kilometers an hour, you know, 55% efficient. When you're driving 15 to 20 kilometers, even less efficient. 20 kilometers an hour and faster, it jumps up a lot. So that slow city driving, it's just really not that efficient on the battery. So it's very interesting to know. 25 to 30 kilometers an hour, again, a big drop in efficiency there. But then once you hit that sweet spot of 30 kilometers an hour and more, things start to level off. This really surprises me in here. Something interesting to note in terms of the efficiency. I wonder what this would look like on a gasoline or diesel vehicle. At these slow speeds, I know it puts a lot of wear and tear on the engine and the parts when you're kind of stopping and starting, and that's kind of what this area represents here. So the stopping and starting, it just is not very efficient, obviously. But what's interesting about speed here is what is the sweet spot? And it looks like, you know, 80 to 85 kilometers an hour seems to be there. 60 to 65 kilometers an hour, kind of the two sweet spots in terms of speed efficiency that you're going to get out. But again, what's interesting here is these bars represent the majority of distance driven at that speed. So quite a bit. I guess the most I've driven, and it makes sense. Guys, this shows you how I've used the car. This is a long-range vehicle, and 95 kilometers an hour to 100 kilometers an hour is the majority speed that I've driven this car. And you can see it's fairly efficient there. And really you don't lose much as you go faster, even up to about 120 kilometers an hour. You know, yeah, plus or minus 5% at most, but really doesn't seem to change much for me. And again, I've driven a fair number of kilometers at these speeds, but the vast majority is 95 to 100. And then, of course, your city driving over here. So very interesting to see that. Not only does this tell me the efficiency of the car, it tells me my driving patterns, right? What generally am I spending most of my time at what speeds? So interesting to see that. All right, what else do we have under drives? Okay, let's look at the lifetime map. So where has this car been in these past 6 years? We've used, I think the kilometers don't quite match to what shows on the car. Like Teslafi says 168 and this says 172 because I believe I started the subscription a month or two after buying the car, so there is a small gap. But anyways, we can see here, according to the lifetime map, it says I have saved $16,826 in gas savings over the 6 years. So basically 17,000, divide that by 6, and that's your yearly average in terms of how much we're saving. And that's just in fuel, not let alone the maintenance and whatnot. Although there is maintenance to do on an EV, it's not completely maintenance free, but definitely there is less. We've used 32,000 kilowatt hours. And generally speaking, the car has been about 75% efficient. Watt hours per kilometer, 191. And yeah, pretty interesting. It's cost us, in 6 years, it's cost us $4,013 in electricity costs to drive this car. 170, well, I guess the cost is only factoring in the kilometers it's rated here. So 168,000 kilometers has cost me basically $4,000 to drive that. Very interesting. And just to kind of look here on the map, where have we driven? So this is, we live right here in north central BC, and we've been out to the coast. We've been up to Dawson Creek. We've been out to northern Manitoba, way up here in the sticks. And just to point out, driving this section here was probably the scariest range anxiety drive I've ever done. It's not that bad once you know what you're doing, but if you're not careful, if you haven't planned this section out, you'll probably get stuck. This is partly gravel road. This section here, gravel road, and there's absolutely no charging between these 2 points. Nothing is there. If you get stuck, it's tow truck season. So anyways, down to Saskatoon, down into Calgary several times. Notice this section here, the Ice Fields Highway. See the colors of the lines? That tells you how frequent. We've done this highway so many times now. People ask a lot of questions. Can you do this? We've done this all times of the year. We've done it in very cold temperatures. We've done it in very snowy conditions where we were like the only car driving through there. No one was driving. This highway does get closed due to avalanche control, etc. And there's really no charging options between Jasper and Banff. Nothing there. There's in the summertime at Saskatchewan Crossing, I think there's a place with a generator, but that's hit and miss. Half the time it's running, half the time it's not. Anyways, we've never used any charging between these two places, and it's one of the most beautiful drives in Canada, in my opinion. Lots of tourists do that drive. But yes, you can drive your EV. Make sure you charge up close to 100% at each site, and watch your driving. Don't drive too fast through there so that you don't burn off more energy. Anyways, we've been down to Kelowna, way down here, all the way down to Vancouver many times. You can see the solid colored line shows how often the drive has been done. So lots of times we've been out west. Lots of times, well, medium times we've been out east here. Lots of times to Calgary. Lots of times up north. Lots of times down south. And that's sort of where we've been with this car. Let's look at our charge summary. You can see here the majority of my non-fast charging, AC charging. You have AC charging, which is of course that type of electricity that we have at home, and basically slower speeds, AC. And then DC are the fast chargers that you see, the industrial chargers that charge much more quickly. So AC charging, mostly at home, perfect case scenario of why you would want an EV if you can charge at home. You get your best rates. BC is pretty cheap for electricity, and lots of charging at home. Supercharging, we've done our fair share. And then non-supercharger fast charging using CHAdeMO or CCS. All the other non-Tesla places we've charged. And here's some totals. So total AC charging, just about 30,000 kilowatt hours. DC charging,
about 8,000, let's say 8,400 kilowatt hours DC charging. And then total, of course, about 38,000 kilowatt hours. So pretty interesting here what these totals are. And the heat map of where most of the charging has been done. So you can see the red, yellow lines, everything in north central BC, and then all the other places we've charged. And that basically follows that lifetime map, of course, of where we've charged. Let's see. And so this graph here is interesting because it's going to show most of the charging, about 78% of all the charging has been non-fast speed charging, basically at home and slower sources. And road trips and whatnot account for less than 1/4 of the driving. And I say road trips because most of the time when you're road tripping, you're using those fast chargers. And that's a point to mention. Fast chargers, when they put fast chargers in your hometown, if you're a person that has a garage and charges in your garage, you don't care about fast chargers in your city. You care about that infrastructure, those fast chargers in cities that you're going on vacation and visiting, because that's the only time you use them. You don't use the quote gas station in your own town, you use your garage, which is very convenient. So just pointing that out. Let's look at our battery report. Tell us what's going on with the battery. I looked at this before and I was surprised, I'll admit it. Nothing earth-shattering, but the battery has degraded, and a bit more than I would have expected. So you can see here from the chart, this blue line is my battery range, and the green line is the fleet average. And so basically I'm at, where are we at? About 18.5% range loss from when I first bought the vehicle. So when I first bought the Tesla Model 3 in 2020, it could do about 518 kilometers on a full charge. And now it's about 425 kilometers that it can do. So not quite 100 kilometer range loss. And I anticipate now that it's dropped this amount, it's basically leveling off at this point and will just very slowly taper from here. Maybe a couple percent each year at most, or something like that, or we'll see. But the majority of your loss happens in the first year or two, and after that you can even see it really hasn't been that much. And this year it says it's dropped a lot, but it can be also because I haven't done a battery balance to see if this is actually accurate or if this is actually a real thing where it's degraded this year. We will see as time goes on. So anyways, that's the battery degradation report for my 2020 all-wheel drive long-range Tesla Model 3. And these are... All right, so let's get into my own costs from these past 6 years. So looking here in the spreadsheet, you can see I've driven 172,500 kilometers. Average kilometers per month is about 2,400 kilometers a month. Average per year is about getting close to 30,000 kilometers per year. Definitely feel that's above the national average. I think most people are about 15 to 20,000. Anyways, total AC charging costs is about $620 a year. Home charging, and then travel fast charging is about, let's say, close to 400. So in the end, on average, I'm spending about $1,000 a year charging this electric car. That's basically averaged out over all those years. And so let's see what the cost breakdown is now between this Tesla Model 3 and projected costs of a Honda Accord. I used to have a Honda Accord, and just kind of looking at this, I spent about $71,000, all taxes in and whatnot, purchasing this Tesla Model 3 in 2020. And I looked at historical values. It would have cost about $32,000 to buy your typical Honda Accord in Canada. And so We have this column. We're going to call this column here the Tesla Model 3 column. This column will be the Honda Accord column, and then this last column is the difference between the two. So we look across, the difference between buying the Tesla Model 3 and the Honda Accord is about getting close to $40,000. That's a big, huge amount, definitely. And one of the top items we saw earlier in the video, getting into the EV market, the cost is definitely one of the items. Total maintenance costs, just looking at regular maintenance on the Model 3, spent about $200. Really, there's not much to do there. We'll get into repairs, which is down here as a sort of subsection of maintenance, but just regular maintenance items without one-off events. About $200. I think there was cabin filters and stuff like that. Whereas regular maintenance for Honda Accord, oil changes and all the regular maintenance items you would have to do over the 6 years comes to $5,100. So in the maintenance department, we have saved close to $5,000 over those years. I did just put point items here, a bunch of car crashes. Didn't put the costs in there because it's not really fair. Would have happened regardless of what vehicle I was driving. And so anyway, there are some costs there. And basically that's all covered by mostly insurance. You have to pay your deductibles, but we just kind of left that as is. Coming down to tires, I threw in an extra cost of $800 for my EV just because it's well known. And just from experience, I know that you have to replace tires sooner on your electric vehicle because they weigh more, the torque is there, and they burn out the rubber faster. So I'm adding an extra $800 cost, basically a set of summer tires extra during that 6-year period. And so that's an extra maintenance there. And then, of course, the two items that I've had to actually replace over the years, which are specific to an electric vehicle. The heater had to replace $2,087. Would have been cheaper if I went to Tesla, but not actually cheaper because there's no service center around me. So the cost actually would have been more than this if I had to get the vehicle to Tesla and whatnot. So anyway, Tesla does it for cheaper than this. So if you're in an area where you have a service center closer, that cost will be cheaper if you had to get it done. Same with the PCS. This is the unit that charges the car. It converts electricity, AC, DC, that kind of thing. Had a failure on that unit, cost close to $4,000 to replace, but I did have it done locally once again. So overall, I saved money by getting it done locally because I wouldn't have been able to drive it. I would have had to get it towed because if you can't charge your car, you can't drive it a long distance. So anyway, added those costs here. So in the end, this last item here is fuel costs. So over the 6 years, averaging about $1,000 a year to charge the car. No surprise that we're just a little over $6,000 in electricity costs to charge the car over those 6 years. Whereas for fuel, this is all calculated in Teslafi, where I saved $16,826 in fuel costs. So the cost total to drive those kilometers in a Honda Accord would have been about $22,000. So interesting, over those 6 years, the cost difference up front over 6 years, you start to see some real savings here. It starts getting closer to that difference. So kind of the short takeaway of the costs here is the longer you drive your EV, the more value you get and the more money you save long term. If you're going to buy an EV short term, you're probably not going to save money because of the upfront costs. Now, if you buy a used EV, you might save some money, but again, it all comes down what price you pay for that used EV, because buying a comparable used non-EV, like gasoline car, will probably be cheaper. So anyway, looking at totals here, $83,000, basically $84,000 between purchase price and maintenance costs and everything for the EV, about $60,000 for the Honda. And so far I'm still paying about $25,000 more, all costs in, for my EV after 6 years. If I exclude the purchase price, then I've saved about $15,000 overall with all maintenance and everything included over those 6 years. And if I exclude the purchase price and the fuel prices, then basically I have spent $1,850 more on my EV than I would have on a Honda Accord. And that's basically saying the maintenance costs over the years. So because I've had these sort of, let's call it these two surprises, and what I'm going to say is looking at what other people's experiences are, a lot of Tesla heaters, it's a common thing that it fails in the first 5 years, more than a person would expect. I'm not sure why, but maybe it was a bad run during that period, but lots of people do have to replace their heater. Even here locally from our members. The PCS, this is more of a rare item. So this $4,000 definitely, I hit the bad lottery having a failure in that area, because most people don't have a failure, definitely not in the first 10 years, etc. So this would have been a different number had I not had that issue. I think most people's experience, you would have been ahead in the maintenance area, probably by about $2,000. So just take that as a note, but my experience was different. So these are the costs that I've encountered over those 6 years, my own personal experience. Hopefully this kind of gives you some context in terms of how things could be for you. This is specific to Northern BC. These maintenance costs would have been different if I lived in Vancouver, Calgary, Toronto, something like that, because there are Tesla service centers there. Even Kelowna now has a Tesla service center. And these costs would have been much cheaper, much easier to deal with. So that's something to take note of. I've talked about this a lot. Getting service for an electric vehicle when you live far away from the main cities can be a big challenge. Definitely for Teslas, which are the number one brand of EVs that are sold across Canada. So just consider that, what you're getting into. But for me and my family, we love driving our Tesla. We love EVs. They're very convenient, and with all the hassles and everything, so far, it's worth it to us. We really enjoy the vehicle. We use it for all kinds of long distance driving. We'll be heading to Vancouver for a wedding in a number of months here, and we will be taking the Tesla.
All right, let's get into charging standards. So lots has changed over the years, over those 6 years. You have low speed charging, AC, and you have high speed charging, DC. And those are the types of electricity that you are basically putting into the vehicle. And so when it comes to charging speed, when it comes to low speed, for AC, you have basically two standards. You have the Tesla plug, which is also known as NACS, and you have J1772, which was everyone else. And basically those have been the standards for several years, but in recent years, in the last couple years, the Tesla plug type, NACS, is become the North American standard. So all vehicles are moving to that as of, I think by the end of 2026, probably most EVs will be using the Tesla variant of the plug. But anyway, talking about AC charging, there's those two types of plugs. Generally, Tesla gives adapters so that if you go to a public charger that uses that low speed J1772, then you can charge there. So something that's important to consider as well when it comes to low speed charging is that not all EVs are able to charge up to the fastest speed for AC charging. So I'm going to show, for example, for Tesla vehicles, depending on which model you have, there will be a maximum low speed charging speed that you can pump into the vehicle, the amps that you're able to do. And that's going to directly relate to the circuit that you get and whatnot. Now, you don't have to get that top speed. You can do a lesser speed circuit. So like you could have lower amount of amps and you'll get a lower speed of charging. If your house or your electric panel does not allow for more amps to be used because other circuits are using it, you can do like 20 amps or something like that. Just means charging speed will be lower. But that is something to note. And when it comes to high speed charging, there are three standards. There is CHAdeMO, which is essentially, for all intents and purposes, been phased out. No one makes new vehicles with CHAdeMO for many years now. That was basically the Nissan Leaf and a few others, and Tesla adapter used that as well. And then there's two standards, CCS and NACS. So you have Tesla plug and you have everyone else. Now, like I said, everything has been transitioning to the Tesla plug, but there are still many vehicles out there that use CCS, and there's still new vehicles being made today in North America that are still using CCS because the manufacturers have not completely transitioned over. So the most important plug types when it comes to high-speed charging are CCS and NACS. And that's what you're going to be dealing with at most of your charging stations. We'll show some video clips there of each type. So CCS is what all non-Tesla vehicles are definitely using, and then NACS are Tesla vehicles as well as modern EVs from GM, Ford, and Chrysler. They are transitioning over, as well as other manufacturers. They're transitioning their newer EVs over to NACS. So this means that you probably will want to make sure what your car can charge on, which adapters you might need. Does your car even support those other standards? It's not just the plug type. Your car needs to be able to communicate in the protocol that is used for that type of charging. So for example, many Tesla vehicles that are before 2021, and I think it was somewhere in 2021 is when Tesla started supporting CCS, but vehicles before that did not support communicating with CCS. This is very important for those owners because the NACS chargers that exist out there that are non-Tesla charging stations, like BC Hydro installed NACS chargers at College of New Caledonia here in Prince George. If your Tesla does not communicate using CCS, you will not be able to charge, even though it's a native Tesla plug type. It still communicates using CCS. So just wanted to point all that out. If you don't know what your car supports and certain adapters and all that, you may find yourself in trouble. If you have a Cybertruck, you need to get a special CCS adapter if you want to charge that on CCS charging stations, because the regular CCS adapters for most of the Tesla vehicles, they're not long enough to fit into a Cybertruck. So those are all just a few notes to point out. Adapters, charging speeds, charging standards. And when it comes to speed, some people will complain saying that charging station is slow. There's a lot that gets into how fast your car is charging. There's this thing called the charge curve, and I'm going to show some graphs on the screen. And every vehicle has a different charge curve depending on what state of charge you're at. If your battery's at 10%, 50%, 80%, every manufacturer has particular speed, maximum speeds that they allow that battery to charge at. And that kind of depends on many factors: how cold it is outside, if the battery's been warmed up enough, or if it's too hot, maybe it needs to cool down. A whole bunch of different factors go into that charging speed. And just some manufacturers do not even allow charging above a certain kilowatt speed, just in order to maintain the lifespan of the battery. I believe some of the older Chevy Bolts did not charge past 50 kilowatts, for example. So you might be at a 350 kilowatt charging station, but you'll never get past 50 kilowatt. That's called the charging curve. And all those sort of limits in terms of what the OEMs put on that charging curve. So that's an important thing to find out when you buy an EV. What is the charging curve for this? You also want to know the size of battery that you have. That will kind of dictate how long it takes to fully charge the battery. Always, for every car, every EV, it takes much longer to charge when you get to 90% state of charge. Going from 90 to 100 takes a very long time because that's in order to preserve the battery lifespan. If you were to charge fast at that high state of charge, it would damage the battery. So all EVs charge very slowly from 90 to 100%, so that should be noted, especially for road trips and whatnot. If you need that last 10% to get somewhere, and you do that frequently, that's going to affect how long you sit at charging stations, much longer. It might take half an hour to a full hour to get from 90 to 100%, depending on how big your battery is. Okay, so when it comes to how much range you have, let's talk about something. Let's talk about infrastructure. and the importance of infrastructure. So we'll take a look here at the Tesla supercharger map. You can see what it looks like there on the screen. Lots of chargers across North America, but the further north you go, especially north of Prince George, BC and Canada, and that line right across the country, going above that line, there's almost nothing above it. There's a few chargers in Alaska and whatnot, but really nothing, which means you are going to rely on third-party high-speed charging stations when you go on road trips. And so infrastructure becomes very important, because if you need to drive long distances because the infrastructure is poor, now that's going to dictate what type of EV you have to buy. You'll have to spend more money on a larger battery. But if infrastructure is good, if BC Hydro, for example, put high-speed charging stations every 200 kilometers, it wouldn't matter what EV you got. You'd be able to drive everywhere. Every 2 hours you could charge up. And that would cover most EVs that exist that are for sale today. But if you have to drive 300 to 400 kilometers to get to the next charging station, now that's going to be a problem. So infrastructure will actually dictate the adoption of EVs, affordable EVs, because you don't have to get such a big battery if infrastructure is good. And that's between both Tesla chargers as well as third-party chargers. Vandalism is also there, right? You come to a charging station, you rely on it. Somebody cut the cables off because they're stealing the copper. But I mean, you have vandalism for regular gasoline vehicles. People cut out the catalytic converters. So just something that you have to be aware of, though. But you will want to check on PlugShare to see that those third-party chargers are working. If you need to drive up the Cassiar Highway in BC, for example, when you take a look at the PlugShare comments, you're going to see lots of problems with chargers there. So it doesn't really bring a lot of confidence doing road trips in certain parts of the country. When it's not just that it shows a charger there, is it reliable? Because that's what's important when it comes to road trips. Another thing is the maximum range your EV has. It becomes very important in some situations because you have battery degradation. As we've talked about for my car, I've lost close to 20% range, 18% or something like that. Add to that when you're driving in cold temperatures, which you kind of lose some range. So you've already lost permanent range because your battery is degrading over time. But now you're also driving in cold temperatures, minus 20 degrees Celsius. You're going to lose 50% of that possibly. Plus the road friction. If you're driving on gravel roads or really icy roads, when there's that difference in friction, that's going to take more range. If you're needing to tow something, if you have an electric truck and you're towing something behind you, maybe snowmobiles, something like that, you're doing a multi-day trip into the backcountry, that range becomes very important. And the cost is therefore going to go up depending on your use case. So if infrastructure was there, then those costs could come down. We wouldn't need as large batteries, but it all comes down to the use case. So we're talking about range anxiety now. When do I not use my EV? So if I'm going on long trips and the infrastructure, charging infrastructure is poor, then that's when I'm not going to use my EV. And so that would be if I was driving up to the Yukon or driving up the Cassiar Highway and stuff like that. I would think twice before taking my EV because I don't want to get stranded. And really, it's an issue not of EVs being bad. It's an issue of infrastructure not being in place. That's really what the situation is here. Almost anywhere else in the province, driving from Prince George, I can go east, I can go west, I can go south, and I really have no concern. But when I drive north, there's a concern because the infrastructure, while there are chargers there, it's muchly improved in these past 6 years. They're not reliable, and there's not enough of them. And they're not close enough together in order to add confidence. And that's really what it comes down to. To remove range anxiety, there needs to be consistency. Enough chargers, every 200 kilometers, and they need to be solid. They need to be working well. So that's something to think of. I feel confident driving north of Prince George with the third-party chargers there. Today, driving to Chetwynd, driving to Tumbler Ridge, driving to Fort St. John, not a problem. Driving north of Fort St. John, that's when I believe confidence starts to become iffy, just because of the history and reliability of the charging stations. That's on Highway 97, by the way. But again, driving up the Cassiar Highway, just take a look at some of those comments on PlugShare, and it becomes obvious what the problems are. All right, so let's get into talking about service.
If you change your mind, I'm the first in line. Honey, I'm still free. Take a chance on me.
If you need me, let me know. Gonna be around.
Got a lot of love, honey, don't you know?
Okay, let's get into EV service, getting service done to your vehicle, which is inevitably going to happen sooner or later. Every vehicle requires it. So I'm going to just start off by talking about different shops that I've had experience with and I've heard others talk about as well. First and foremost, River's Edge Services. This shop has spent considerable money getting trained in high voltage electric vehicle related items, and I've personally used them several times. And anything to do with EV specific items, they are the go-to shop in Prince George. Now, if you have warranty work that you need done, that might be an issue because Tesla usually wants you to go to a Tesla service center, but of course, for Tesla vehicles, there are no service centers. You're a good 8 hours away from any location. So you might be able to get, if you can wait, you might be able to get mobile services. Sometimes Tesla mobile service comes up. We'll talk about that in a bit. But anyway, River's Edge Services, well trained in complicated EV issues. I've had my PTC heater replaced with them. I've had my PCS replaced with them. They also know how to upgrade your Tesla vehicle so that you can support CCS charging, as we've previously mentioned. It's about 1 hour labor. It doesn't take much. The parts cost more probably than the labor does. Next one is Cartwright's Wrench. So this is just a well-known mechanic shop in the heart, and I have brought my vehicle there for simple diagnosis. And what I would say is for Cartwright's Wrench, anything that's like mechanical issue, which, steering related or anything like that, that's not high voltage, you could give them a try. Of course, River's Edge can do everything end to end. It's just that River's Edge is more expensive. They have more overhead because they've invested a lot more. They're very high tech, and they do have a lot of mechanics there. Cartwright's Wrench is just basically a couple guys there, but very honest guy, and very reasonable prices, and he does a great job. So I had a problem with steering. When I was driving, the steering wheel was shaking back and forth, and I had suspected maybe it was related to one of the linkages hooked up to my tire, but it was not. It was actually, in the end, my wife drove over a big pothole, and 1 hour diagnosis, and the guy at Cartwright's Wrench was able to find out that it was just the tire. The tire actually was ruined. It had kind of delaminated inside, and that brings us to the next one, and that is Tirecraft Island North. And this guy, he's basically specializes in doing tires and alignments. And I've had actually both of those things done at this shop, and he's actually right beside Cartwright's Wrench. And he replaced the tires, no problem. He knows how to do alignment on Tesla vehicles, no problem. Reasonable rates, and does a pretty good quality job. So those are just kind of three third parties that you can get service done around Prince George for doing windshields and glass and stuff like that. Right now, the one I'm going to recommend is FFR Glass, and that's because we've had our members in the Facebook group mention that, good success there. I called them up a month or two ago and just confirmed, yes, they do replace Tesla windshields, no problem. Another company that I've had my windshield done with, but this would be years ago now, and that's Glacier Glass. Glacier Glass, it's hit and miss. Sometimes you have a good experience. Other times people have reported in the Facebook group problems where they don't replace it and they put the broken windshield back and say they can't do it and stuff like that. So I'm not sure what to say, but my experience with Glacier has been good, but others have not had good experience. So I'm just reporting the facts. I don't have any preference personally. It's just whoever does the best job and the least amount of hassle. If you need to get body work done, if you're in an accident, if you're a Tesla vehicle, you'll see here, I'm on Tesla's website, there are no ICBC approved shops anywhere near Prince George. You got to go down to Kelowna or Vancouver or somewhere in Edmonton or Alberta. And of course, ICBC is British Columbia, so you can't really cross into another province to get the work done, as far as I know. or it'd be complicated. So you're looking to drive many hours down, and if you can't drive the car, that's a long tow. So if you need ICBC work done, that's what you have to do. I've made a video about that because I did have a few crashes where people crashed into my Tesla, and I had to drive down to Kelowna, fly home, do all that whole thing again. Now, if you do not need to get ICBC work, if you're just going to pay it out of pocket, there are a few shops in Prince George that were willing to do it, at least when I needed it done. I think I had my frunk replaced, and they did it because they didn't have to go through ICBC. So when it comes to Tesla parts, let's just quickly talk about that since we're talking about service. Tesla does have this epc.tesla.com website, and it stands for Electronic Parts Catalog. And if you need to see what all parts are included to do brakes or something like that, or if you know of a third-party shop that maybe wants to start supporting Tesla repairs, they should set up an account at epc.tesla.com. They can order parts. They can see all the steps required to replace the parts. There is a service manual that gives all the breakdown and whatnot. And if they pay a subscription to Tesla, they can do it by 1 day, by 1 month, by 1 year. Prices are somewhat reasonable for what they give you. They can do the repairs in the vehicle. So that's just something for Tesla. And of course, all the other OEMs, they'll probably have dealers in town: Ford, GM, Chrysler, Honda, etc. So that's just something to mention there. And I guess the next thing is, let's take a look at the Facebook groups and just see what people said about service. So this first one, I'm in the generic Northern BC EV group, and I just did a quick search for the word service. And as I scroll down, we can see here, I talk about you can use FFR glass for your windshields. Just trying to find people's comments here. Tesla Mobile coming to town. Let me know if you want to be part of that as they come into town. So for simple things, sometimes Tesla does send service agents up into our region, and if there's enough people interested in getting work done, then that saves you a trip, which is hugely useful. But at best, that's like once or twice a year from my experience over the last 6 years. Of course, me getting my power conversion system replaced at River's Edge, and I gave a report on that. Great experience, but was a bit expensive for the labor, but it saved me money in the long run because I could not drive the vehicle anyway, and basically I feel like I was bailed out by River's Edge. So I'm very happy to promote them because I think they do great work. You can see here also River's Edge talking about other work they've done, electronic parts. They're pretty expert at doing that, so just to point that out. And just to point out for service, if you do need to get your EV towed, make sure it's not done like this. This will ruin the electric motors on your axles, because EVs, they have regen, and the oil's not meant for those tires spinning when the active coolant isn't cooling the motors, and so it'll overheat and burn out your motors. Make sure you use a flat deck. Most tow trucks should know that by now, but obviously some do not, so make sure if you get your EV towed, it's on a flat deck. All right, so anyways, let's look at the Tesla specific service group. We can see here one of our members talking about Tesla service coming into town, and let us know if you would like any service done, possible scheduled Tesla Kelowna visits to Prince George. That's kind of a newer thing they're starting up again. There was a period of time where they didn't come to town for a long time, so starting to do that again, which is great. Here's an announcement of Tesla opening a service center in Kelowna. Tesla Mobile back in August of 2024, coming up to Prince George, or for those members in Quesnel, you would pass through. So anyway, and here's an example of one of our members getting some work done on his vehicle when Tesla Mobile service came up to Prince George. Fantastic. And speaking of service, yes, you do have to replace your 12-volt battery in your EV. Newer Teslas use a lithium-ion 12-volt battery, which should last much longer, like 10 years, but these lead acid batteries and Teslas that are, I'm going to say 2021 and older, they need to be replacing those batteries probably every 4 to 5 years, something like that. And they are AGM batteries, aluminum glass metal, I think it stands for, something like that. But you can get AGM batteries for your regular ICE vehicles as well. But you make sure you get the same. You can get any generic brand, but make sure the specs of the battery are the same. I've replaced mine and everything's been great for years. Let's talk about used EVs in the north. So third-party shops, like the ones I've already mentioned, are essential when it comes to people buying third-party EVs. And that's because at that point, you do not want to be beholden to dealerships, even Tesla, in that they may quote you a really high price, for example, to replace your high voltage battery. They might say it's $15,000 to $20,000 to get a new battery, whereas if you bring it to River's Edge or something like that, they may diagnose the battery and find out which cells are bad and just do maybe a $5,000 replacement or $2,000 replacement. So used EVs, when you don't have your warranty with the manufacturer anymore, third-party shops become very important. And used EVs, of course, are very affordable compared to buying new. So that's just something to consider when we're talking about Tesla, when we're talking about EV service. In the north, that's definitely something to think about. And just one other item to touch on here. So we, of course, have China will soon be importing EVs into Canada in 2026. Think long and hard about this. The initial purchase price may be, significantly cheaper compared to, your North American brands. But how will Chinese brands address service? And this is something people don't think about necessarily up front when they buy a vehicle, but you should think about it. Even if it's a used Chinese EV, how will I get this fixed? And so before you buy it, it might be a good idea to contact some of our local third-party shops, like River's Edge and others like that, to see, can you work on such and such a car? Because Chinese brands, the chance of them opening their own dealership in a place like Prince George in surrounding area is just as likely as Tesla doing it, which is basically non-existent, at least not anytime soon. So Chinese brands, think about it, because you will need to get service eventually. Make sure that you'll be able to get that done. Okay, so we're just about to wrap up here. Let's talk about EV trucks. This is sort of, in my opinion, the final frontier. And really, when it comes to northern BC, you need a truck with enough range to do truck stuff. And we've kind of talked a bit about that before, driving down logging roads for long distances, for towing in the cold, all that kind of thing. If you want to tow, say, down to, if you want to drive into Kakwa and, drive your snowmobiles, several kilometers down that Walker Forest Service Road, or pick your place. It's going to be a distance. You want to drive as far as you can, and then unload your snowmobiles and off you go. Or you want to tow your boat out to the lake, or tow your wood from the hardware store home, or whatever it is. So for all intents and purposes, I asked, what's the maximum range for EV trucks in Canada? And basically the Chevy Silverado EV is what I would say the only EV that has an acceptable range for the kinds of things that people want to do in northern BC. And here you see it's about almost 500 miles or 800 kilometers. And something like that's going to work because you can drive, 3 to 4 hours down a logging road and make it back without basically having to get towed. And that's quite reasonable, I would say, for what a lot of people want to use trucks for, going 4x4ing down logging roads, etc. A range like that is reasonable, especially because you're not going to get that full range. That's like perfect conditions. If you're towing, if the weather's cold, it's going to be much less than that. So remember that when you're towing snowmobiles or anything like that, you're not going to get that range. You're going to maybe cut that in half or something like that. So this is really the only acceptable truck range that's going to work in northern BC for doing real truck stuff. So if I take a look here at our local dealership, they have two Silverado EVs, and unfortunately this one that they're showing here, it's about $70,000, and you can see when I scroll down it says the range for that price is only 460 kilometers. So this is not the longer range ones. If I scroll down a bit more, you will see there's two that are in transit, supposedly making their way to the dealership. And in the small print it says range of about 660 kilometers each of them, which is nowhere near that 800, so I'm not sure what's going on there. But these are $100,000, and then taxes are on top of that. So you're going to pay probably $120,000, $130,000 to get a truck that has 660 kilometers. My Tesla Model 3 brand new at $65,000 was about 518 kilometers. So this is like 150 kilometers more, but that's just not enough for a truck. And for such a high price, you'd expect that it gives you everything you need. So guys, I still think trucks are not really there yet. It's debatable at this price with this range. You're probably going to be okay for road trips, but honestly, I don't think that range is going to be enough to tow any distance or to drive any distance into the backcountry. And that's my thoughts on electric trucks at this time, early 2026, because things do change quickly. All right, so let's wrap it up with the final summary. So what are EVs not good for in northern BC? Rural areas in Canada, which have similar situation that we have here in the Prince George region. People who are looking for a hands-off purchase, who live far away from a service center. So if you live in Prince George region, anywhere around here, any of the communities several hours north, south, east, west, and you're looking to buy a vehicle where you just have you don't even have to think about it, you don't have to worry about it, that's just not going to be what you're going to have happen if you buy an EV. And what I mean by that is you have to do thinking. You have to think, can I drive in this direction? What are the chargers like? All that kind of thing. You have to do some thinking. How am I going to get service? What do I have to do to take care of this EV? It's different. If you're just looking for a sort of passive, buy this vehicle and don't think again, it's probably going to be a challenge for you. There is some education that is required there when you buy an EV, so it's not good for you if that's what you're looking for. If you're located in an area with poor charging infrastructure and you can't charge at home, probably EVs are not going to be a good choice for you. And I say that because if you don't have good charging infrastructure and you can't charge at home, where are you going to charge? You're always going to be stressed out. You're going to be trying to find some place to charge. If you can't charge in your garage, it's just going to add stress. If you live in a condominium or something like that, or townhouses where they don't have EV charging there and you don't have charging in town, good infrastructure, or if there's only one and you have like 100 EVs and they're all fighting for it, and a whole bunch of people live in condos and they're all fighting for that one charger, it's just not going to be fun for you. If you have long rural drives, so you have to drive from one city to the next, more than 300 kilometers, so more than basically a 3-hour drive at a time with no charging infrastructure between start and end point of the 300 kilometers, you probably don't want to get an EV. It's going to be stressful for you. You might be able to get that Silverado or some other long-range EV, but it's still going to always be stressful. You have cold weather, or it's really snowy or rainy, and you're going to wonder, am I going to make it? And that's really just something to think about. So another person that EVs will not be good for, somebody who you have to drive a truck down rural roads, like, that Saskatchewan farmer, and you're towing heavy loads, you're on the farm, and you're in cold climates all the time, and you have to drive for, let's say, more than 250 kilometers distances, and there's poor charging infrastructure, it's probably not for you. Now, this is kind of combined things I've already spoken of, but just trying to point out those use cases where it may not work good for you. I mean, if you're a Saskatchewan farmer and you have, obviously you have electricity at your house, you can charge your truck there, and you're just driving it around the farm doing farm work, towing there, it's probably an outstanding choice. Your maintenance costs will be significantly lower, You have your fuel right there on the farm. You don't have to drive to town and keep refilling up and just charge the truck at home. It could be great. So it really just depends on if you're driving far away from the farm to do stuff, you don't have good infrastructure, it's not going to be good. For people who infrequently use their vehicle, EVs will probably not be a good idea for you. Infrequent use of an EV, it's not too much of an issue, but there's long-term consequences if you don't carefully monitor your vehicle. If you just, like with a gas vehicle, you just buy it, let it sit, it'll start getting rusty and maybe the 12-volt battery will die. Same thing will happen with your EV, the 12-volt battery will die. But your high-voltage, expensive battery will be permanently damaged if you're not properly maintaining it. It should be plugged in. If you let it sit for like 3 months, 6 months at a time, you don't have it plugged in, or you just use your EV infrequently, you may, and you're not paying attention to it, it's probably not a good fit for you. There's a number of things that you need to do to take care of that vehicle and to get the payback to make it worth it. The upfront cost is going to be more. If you don't use it frequently, you're not going to be paying back that initial higher cost anytime soon. Short-term cost savings. If you're looking for short-term cost savings, probably EVs are not going to be a great fit for you. You spend more money in tires because they wear faster. The EV does something called phantom drain, where you just lose sort of some of your battery capacity charging because some of the energy is used to warm up the cab, warm up the battery, maintain things. So there's phantom drain. The complexity around getting service done, like we talked about, charging education, so short-term cost savings, maybe if you buy a used EV and you have all the right things like home charging and stuff like that, maybe, but short-term cost savings generally are not going to help you out for an EV. You have to think long-term, at least today in 2026. And the last person who an EV, in my opinion, is not good for, if you like a vehicle that makes a lot of noise, EVs are generally very quiet. If you're one of those muscle car people, EVs are just not going to cut it for you. People try to buy these kits that make them make fake noises and stuff, but you're just not going to like the lack of loud rumble and vibration. And, everyone's not going to turn their heads and stare at you with your vehicle that's driving super fast down the road but very quiet. Remember, when EVs back up, they have to make an artificial noise by law so that they don't run over people because they're so quiet. So that's sort of my general list of who EVs are not good for. So now let's talk about who EVs are exceptional for. So in my opinion, people who live close to a service center, if you buy a Tesla and you live in one of those cities where you're within an hour of a service center, it's going to be an awesome experience. And if you buy a Ford, GM, Chrysler, an OEM vehicle, and you live close to that dealership, it's probably going to be a decent experience. People who can do home charging, if you can just drive into your garage, drive into your parking lot or your driveway, and just plug into your house and charge that way, it's going to be an excellent experience. People who do a lot of city driving, it's going to be an excellent experience because, that stop and start, which is normally very hard on ICE vehicles, it's not going to be so bad on a EV. So it's really great for city driving. For people who do winter driving, now this is controversial because a lot of the media will say, oh, EVs are terrible in the winter. No, actually, everyone in this household and many other households that I speak with love driving EVs in the winter. The traction is superb. You can heat up your cabin very quickly with an EV. You don't have to let it run for 10 minutes when it's minus 20 and 30 out. Heats up very quickly. You can also heat up your vehicle in a closed garage because there's no carbon monoxide poisoning happening, right? There's just so many advantages. They're very reliable. There's no engine to warm up that's required. You can remotely defrost the vehicle. Exceptional to drive in the winter, with the caveats that I've already mentioned. If you need to drive long distances with poor infrastructure, that's different. Long trips with reasonable charging infrastructure, EVs are fantastic. That's exactly what this channel is all about. I've done that many times all over the place, and I've proven that's the case. If you're looking for long-term cost savings, EVs are the way to go. There's just no question. You can already see my cost breakdown that over time it just gets better and better. You save more and more money. And the last point, that EVs are exceptional for people who are looking for reliability, minimum maintenance. You know, when you read that ad in the paper that this car is lady driven, usually when it's an ICE vehicle, people will shy away from that vehicle because they're like, yeah, it's not taken care of, it hasn't been maintained. But lady driven for EVs actually makes sense. It's like women are generally more gentle on cars, but they oftentimes have been known to forget about maintenance and skip oil changes and stuff like that. Well, with EVs, that's okay, because you don't usually have those kinds of things that you have to worry about. So of course, the main thing there would be to make sure the high voltage battery is in good shape, but otherwise it could be a really good purchase. So those are the points that I would make for people who EVs are not a good fit for and EVs are exceptional for. Anyways, hope you guys enjoyed this video. I put a lot of time into this one. Feel free to leave your comments below. These are just my experiences. It doesn't mean yours are going to be exactly the same. I live in Prince George, British Columbia, Canada. Temperatures, as you have seen, they can go as high as 40 degrees Celsius, as cold as minus 40. So we have a big variance there. And in the end, my family enjoys our EVs, and I'm hoping to see some great options for trucks, which will be the final frontier. Catch you guys on the next video. Thanks. Bye.